So yeah, getting online with e-commerce. As it mentioned in the description, there's actually a little mention of the BC e-commerce grant in here, but that grant, just at least in my circles, prompted sort of a flurry of interest in the topic. So I thought it would be fun to do a little session on it. Essentially, it's up to $7,500 funded at a 75% reimbursement to help British Columbia companies get online. So great opportunity there. Although again, what we're going to jump into is applicable to basically anybody anywhere that wants to get into e-commerce. So moving along, we're going to do a presentation. Obviously, going to try and keep it fairly succinct and try and be fairly quick. One big thing about it is I will keep it quite conversational. So if you do have a question, please just hit the chat or the Q&A, and I'll try and keep an eye on those. And we'll address any simple questions as we go. So for instance, if I'm not clear on explaining something, I'd love a chance to explain it a bit further as we go. Otherwise, we'll save it for the Q&A session at the end. And I'm really hoping to try and make it through and in time that we have at least 15 or 20 minutes for any Q&A, and absolutely love sort of diving into any challenges or questions that anyone's facing. And as it mentions in number 3 there will be slides available, and we do make these videos available afterwards. So takes a little time to produce the video into something to get up onto YouTube. So that'll be next week that will be available, and we'll definitely send out links. And so just a quick note about myself, and of course this isn't about me, and it's funny because I was actually on a webinar this morning where somebody else was presenting, and I noted that they went on way too long about themselves, so I promised myself I wouldn't do that today. But I got into e-commerce back in 2001. I was lucky enough to be hired to run email marketing for a company that had never done email marketing, software company, but they had a database of almost 1 million people. So sort of a funny thing to get hired at with no previous experience in the field. And I was kind of blessed to be getting into the industry at that point when sort of having the skill set, but not the experience was still okay. Anyhow, long story short, in that $10 million company, we ended up doing $1 million in email sales in the first year after we launched the program, and grew that to 3 million in sales over 3 years before I actually got lucky enough to take over all the digital marketing for that company, which was just a real experience. So anyhow, I by no means would call myself an absolute e-commerce expert, but definitely have sort of a wide range of generalist knowledge that I think can be helpful here. And one quick note, we're gonna go quite quickly through things. Each slide that we're going to look at could literally be a day-long program. So obviously getting through it in 40 minutes, we're just going to hit the top points. But as mentioned, please hit me up in the Q&A, and we'll get into any specific details or challenges that you want to. So with that said, let's carry on. The first and biggest thing, and as you'll note, of course, the tone of this is a little bit towards folks who are just getting into e-commerce. But the big thing is have a plan. I see a lot of situations where folks think that, well, they have something they want to sell, and sort of think that launching the store is the plan. And to be honest, it's absolutely not. Just it's not going to get you anywhere near where you need to go. You really need to know who's going to buy, like specifically what regions, what demographics, what interests they have, what their needs are, why your product is better than them for other people. So, and that all needs to be on your site. You need to know sort of why they're going to buy, of course, and then, you know, there's a bunch of points in how you'll make this all happen. First off, you really need to keep it simple, and this is where I see folks that are new to e-commerce, they picture this massive site and massive store and catalog that they eventually want to have. And sadly, they go and try and build that immediately. And especially if you're doing some of it yourself, or if you're new to e-commerce, that's the last thing you want to do. You absolutely 100% want to find the products that are most likely to sell, do a really simple site that's really well executed, and you're going to do way better than launching some massive effort with 200 products that you haven't sold online before. It sort of sucks, but there are really no points for effort. It's all about doing the right things and doing them well, doing a really good job on what you do, rather than how much work you put into it. And it's just tragic because we see this over and over and over again. Folks that put sometimes literally months putting a site together, and do a sloppy job, say on image optimization. So the site is way too slow to load and it's just not going to work. Again, start with something simple and kind of grow it from there. Market validation. I was lucky enough to take one of our business divisions through the Accelerate Techtoria program at Viatech, which, as the name suggests, is an accelerator. And at the time, I found it kind of annoying, but they really, really harped on market validation. And at its simplest, whatever you want to sell online, do people want to buy it when they actually see it in person? And long story short, but if you have a product and if you say meet with a group of people that are your target audience, or the sort of folks who would like to buy it, or even if it's a series of one-on-one meetings or calls, if they're not buying it, you're not ready to go online and sell it. And again, there are opportunities. There's lots of examples of startups that do want to do their market validation online. But that said, if you don't first determine that who's going to buy and will they buy it, and then of the people that buy it, who's going to buy it and why did they buy it, if you skip that step and try and learn that online, that's going to be super expensive. That's going to cost a lot of dough. I mean, a well-funded startup can sometimes do that, but for regular folk and regular businesses like myself and most of the people that we work with, just simply not the case. And you just really, really need to 100% make sure that you do that first. And if you don't, you're basically doomed. I can't think of an example of somebody that has a product that sells online where it's not fairly readily, air quote, sellable offline. So let me just jump in here. In terms of promoting stuff, I mean, assuming that you do go through the step of knowing who's going to buy, how will you reach them? Again, it's not, in the early days of the web, there were really real success stories about people just launching a store. And this was like really unique, and folks would find it and buy stuff, and people would get rich. I've chatted, I mean, I've been in our agency now for almost 14 years. I've chatted with literally thousands of business owners. I have yet to meet anybody for whom that has happened in the last 10 years or so. So, you really do need to think about not just, what you're selling, who you're going to sell it to, but how the heck are you going to reach them? And really, and a lot of this comes through, of course, running an agency now. We work with a ton of clients, and a lot of this is self-preservation. Really, it's just that learning that, okay, out of the gate, it takes some experimentation to figure out how somebody is going to sell something. So you really need to plan things. Consider your early plan to be simply a thesis. Your plan is absolutely, if you launch today, your plan is going to look dramatically different 30 days from now. So basically consider your plan a thesis, and then you want to run experiments on it. And really the goal early on is to identify which tests are showing progress and to launch them in a modest but meaningful manner, so that you don't break the bank doing this testing process that you're absolutely going to have to do. And then a huge thing, and I'm constantly blown away when I see people spending, hundreds, sometimes thousands, or even tens of thousands of dollars on advertising without setting up their tracking to be able to understand exactly what's working and exactly what's not. So the tracking part of it, don't even start without having all the tracking in place. Another huge thing is to learn about conversion rate optimization. And really, conversion rate optimization, or if I was being really geeky, I would just be calling it CRO. Another thing about conversion rate optimization, really, it's just, I guess the old school term is merchandising. It's how to set up your site and your product pages in order that people will actually buy. And it's interesting, like in person, when somebody can physically see what you're selling, uh, they can see it, they can touch it. There's a certain amount of trust and confidence that somebody has from shopping in a bricks and mortar environment. In a web environment, that trust and credibility, it's the opposite. People are going to be distrustful until you illustrate that you can be trusted. So in short, you really must present your offering professionally, credibly. You've got to answer all the questions somebody might have on their product page, and there's sort of a checklist of things to do. And this sort of funny example, the screenshot that's on your screen is actually somebody that reached out online and asked for some advice that has a product that, and this was their product page. It's actually a collar for, I think this one's a duck collar, but for hunters, and long, great history behind this company. That said, here's their product page. It's like, oh, if you don't already know exactly what this product is, exactly who this company is, and are simply arriving at the site to buy it, there's no chance that you're going to buy this. Absolutely no chance. There's just not enough information to make a buying decision. And that's really an important distinction I actually don't have in my notes and slide here, is there's a massive difference between a situation where, if you're, say, a local bricks and mortar retailer, there's a massive difference between somebody who already knows that you have something and sells something and already trusts you. They can come to your site and your site can more or less stink and they'll still buy the product because they know and trust you. If you're having somebody arrive at your website through social media or search who doesn't know you previously, a totally different thing. You have to, the bar that you have to set for professionalism and credibility is just exponentially higher on that front. And we see that in all industries. So to jump to what you really should think about for your product page, and there's other conversion rate stuff sort of for the whole site, but we don't have time enough today to get into that. So sort of a quick checklist, and this is by no means necessarily complete, but first off, you need a complete and compelling description of what you're offering. That should seem obvious, but I see so many product pages that have like a sentence. Somebody absolutely needs to know about the product and why they would buy it. Basically, you need to show your return policy, your shipping information, your guarantee. Again, if somebody doesn't already know you and doesn't already know these policies, there's pretty much no chance they're going to buy without understanding these three different things. And if you have it hidden off somewhere, that takes somebody right out of the sales process and out of the sales funnel. So you definitely need to include that right on the page. Kind of goes without saying that you need a professional design, and it goes beyond just simply being professional and proud of your offering in that. Basically, this is the proxy for somebody understanding if they can trust you. If somebody comes to a page and it has misspellings or a button doesn't work, or it's just hard to understand, or it doesn't look good, your credibility is basically shot, and the trust just never happens. So the sales ridiculously unlikely to happen. And even if it is a somewhat known quantity and there's a bit of trust built up there, the level of the design and professionalism has huge bearing on the price points that people are willing to pay. If your product is presented great, people will be expecting to pay a little bit more and will be happy to pay a little bit more versus if they were looking at that same product on a site that looked like garbage. All that said, you don't need to go over the top on design. You really just need to make sure that it meets the requirements. And definitely, it's not like you can have, there's no risk of having it look too good. But that said, it's not an impossible bar to reach. You just basically need to use some common sense and make sure that it looks professional. just organizing a couple windows here. So yeah, next point is proof point, what we call proof points or credibility indicators. Things like short testimonials, like a quick sentence of somebody that looks and is a legitimate customer that has a quote about or testimony about how much they love the product. That's an example of a proof point. Credibility indicators, things like if you belong to professional associations or have won awards, or if you belong to the Better Business Bureau, having those logos on the page all helps. Again, I think I mentioned in great depth already, you want to answer all the questions that might come up. And then another thing, you need to counter any objections. And again, this goes back to that market validation of sort of figuring out who's buying and why they buy. And almost as importantly, you have to understand why they don't buy. Like what questions would they ask, or what things would keep them from buying? And then you need to counter those on your page if they're significant. And then lastly, strategic pricing. And actually, this is one area where this product does reasonably good job, $149. I don't want to get too much into pricing, but the techniques that you've seen your whole life that you think are garbage, like where there's a price that's $99.99. Everybody knows it's $100, but I've seen this myself through literally hundreds of tests of pricing, that $99.99 price point will outsell something that's marked $100. Also interesting findings from when I used to do tons of testing. If you're going to have a price point of say $44.99 versus $49.99, they'll both sell equally. Basically, if it's over 40 and under 50, or whatever sort of price point, the conversion rate doesn't actually change until you get up into that next sort of $10 increment in that example for a low price software product that I was testing. I can't tell you exactly what those increments are for all products, but I 100% guarantee that they're there. So for instance, if you're charging $189, I would virtually guarantee that you can sell exactly as many units if you charge $199, because people are rounding that up to 200 in their head anyhow. I guess an interesting aside is that my own personal reason why the obvious sort of gimmicky price points work is that in a situation where somebody wants to convince themselves that they should buy, they can kind of rationalize that it's that lower sort of price point. I have no idea if that's accurate or not, but that's my theory anyhow. So a couple notes in short. If you already know how to sell offline, so if you're somebody that has a bricks and mortar store and you're selling offline, or you sell in whatever sort of areas, basically all you need to do is transfer this online in a strategic manner using those bullets that I mentioned. One thing I will mention is that if you don't have in-person sales skills, I would really recommend doing some learning on this front, because essentially all you're doing on your website is replacing the process that would otherwise happen in person. So, I mean, a fun exercise is to think of whatever your product is, if somebody was going to buy it in a store, what process would they go through? Would they need help in comparing several different options or models? Would they have questions about different features? And basically, if you can figure that out, then that's what you need to transfer to the web. So, in terms of platforms, we'll talk a little bit about the different platforms now. There's tons of e-commerce platforms, and I know there's a question. I'm not sure if the woman who asked has joined us, but there was a question about a t-shirt platform, for instance, which I'm not horribly familiar with. But what I'll say is for most of us, you're really looking at Shopify, WordPress, along with the WooCommerce commerce plugin, or Squarespace. And again, a million different options out there, but those are the main ones that most people are going to be considering. There's also Amazon, Facebook shops, and some other marketplaces. And so let's just jump in and have a look at some of those. Shopify, I really like Shopify. I initially didn't like it so much, but they have developed a really wonderful platform. If you're wanting to do it yourself, and build a store, totally viable to do it on Shopify if you invest some time and effort. Shopify is ridiculously simple to maintain. It can integrate with your point of sale system from your store, which is super powerful because then you have all your inventory levels online, and even that extends to things like I mentioned below, Google Shopping. You can even have, if you're doing Google Shopping ads, they actually feed off Shopify, which feeds off your point of sale system so that it automatically will only advertise things that you have in stock, which is pretty darn cool compared to trying to manually manage that process. Shopify supports great search engine optimization. It's not the absolute best there, as I mentioned below. And it's not as customizable as WordPress. That said, in terms of personally, I do recommend Shopify to folks that want to do it themselves. And if they want a simple platform that's not hard to maintain, and if having the store is their main mission for their website, then absolutely, hands down, be my first choice. And cost-wise, the cost start at $29 a month if you do it yourself. I guess I will throw in lots of professional providers of Shopify stores. You can get everything from companies that will sort of do the heavy lifting and sort of set up, and right up to companies that will totally customize the Shopify look and feel for you. Price point to get professional help kind of ranges to build a site, kind of ranges from maybe at the low end, $1,000 to $1,500 to help build a very simple store. At a high end, there's really no top end, although you do see customized Shopify stores starting kind of at around $5,000. Interestingly, at the lower end that I mentioned, a huge chunk of it is actually doing the integrations and setup with other tools like the proper analytics and hooking up a point of sale if you have a point of sale and that sort of thing. Moving to WordPress and WooCommerce, I mean, in our situation, we are a WordPress shop, so we love WordPress. I mean, we also build Shopify sites. We build on just about any platform. So this, if you have a site that is going to be a marketing site that incorporates e-commerce, this is probably the way to go. It's extremely customizable. Absolutely the best solution for search engine optimization. That said, it's considered a do-it-yourself platform, but I'm gonna say it's really not. WordPress is ridiculously accessible in terms of you can fire it up, you can add in all kinds of plugins that automatically do all the things you want it to. You can load up themes. There's some fantastic visual editors that make it really easy to build. That said, if you take advantage of all those features, they're super heavy in terms of code and what they add to your website. So it's very rare that we see a do-it-yourself site that is fast enough performance-wise, just because all those really handy things. Basically, the easier something is to set up in WordPress, the more it slows down your website. And there's some ways around that. And to be honest, also I should make it clear, I'm not sort of against do-it-yourself. I love jumping into things myself. So I absolutely, if you're up for the challenge, I would say 100% go for it. I actually really enjoy working in WordPress, although the team doesn't really allow me to do that anymore because I'm not that good at it. But it's a lot of fun. It is accessible if you make that investment, but you really need to understand what you're getting into. Cost-wise, WordPress itself doesn't cost anything. To get a decent theme might cost sort of around $80 one-time purchase. And so, but really the costs are as little as your monthly hosting fee if you are doing it yourself. In practical terms, to get a company to build an e-commerce website for you on the WordPress and WooCommerce, sort of starting at the low end without any fancy features at around $3,000 and going up to literally as much as you want to spend. Interesting to kind of buyer beware because the pricing is all over the map on this sort of stuff, and it doesn't always reflect the value and quality that you're getting too. So definitely want to do your homework and look at other sites that companies have built for you. Have built before you jump in there. Squarespace, I actually love Squarespace. It's another example of a site that when it launched, it wasn't great for things like search engine optimization, but I think they have an amazing product management team there, and they have advanced it so much. It's kind of the go-to site that when a friend asks me advice and they want to build their own simple site, I'll send them straight to Squarespace. It has good SEO features, great track record for the ongoing improvement. What I will say, and they have recently added the e-commerce as well as membership functions. It's a bit limited in customization though. So if your main goal is a store, I would absolutely, like a store with a significant number of products, I would 100% go to Shopify. If you're looking at having a simple website that just has a couple products, Squarespace is quite possibly a good option. And the costs for Squarespace is about $18 a month if you do it yourself. Again, you can get professionals to help build it to accelerate the process. Simple single page sites typically by legit companies simply start at say around $500 to $600. That would not include e-commerce. And then of course it goes up from there. Amazon and other marketplaces are really interesting. There's a whole ton going on at Amazon. I have one close friend and business colleague who is making a fortune on Amazon right now. That said, I'm not an Amazon expert, and it's scary. There's a lot to it. Nothing sells itself on Amazon, and the competition is ruthless. And even Amazon, if you're doing well, there are programs that they want to get you into, and they'll even, you hear stories of Amazon just starting to sell their own products that compete against good selling products that come up. So you really need a very strong strategy. And the colleague I mentioned who's doing well, doing really well on it, sort of the caveat is that he spent probably $200,000 on advertising in Amazon to get to a point where he was making money, which is way beyond my personal risk tolerance, let me tell you, even if I had that kind of dough laying around. But it is definitely tons of opportunities on Amazon, but it is a big commitment, and absolutely get ready with a strategy before jumping in. Facebook shops, people talk about them. They're great, although I have yet to hear an example of somebody telling me that their Facebook shop was successful as their main store. We do see them, and we've actually integrated a bunch of Facebook and Shopify stores. Basically, your Shopify store can feed directly into a Facebook shop. Super simple to do, and it gives you sort of an incremental sales opportunity to add to your sales without a whole lot of work. The other thing about Facebook is, quite frankly, they suck. And I say that tongue in cheek, but actually quite sincerely. They're a closed platform. They change their rules all the time. I would absolutely not put all your eggs in one basket in terms of a Facebook shop, in terms of they might decide they don't like you for no particular reason one day, and all of a sudden it's suspended and your entire store is up in smoke. They have garbage support, and getting it reinstated is near impossible. And as you can probably guess, I've had some really painful examples and experiences along those lines myself recently. And I mean all that in the nicest possible way to Facebook. So tracking your sales. Most platforms have some internal tracking, but you absolutely want to use and leverage Google Analytics. I consider Google Analytics to probably be the best free marketing tool ever. There is a little bit of a learning curve. It's definitely not as simple as just looking at the stats from the back end of your shop in Shopify or WooCommerce. But that said, it gives just a wealth of information that you otherwise will not get. And basically, unless you're ridiculously lucky, you can't grow without getting those insights and figuring out how things are working on the back end. And even if you are lucky and manage to grow without it, you would be growing exponentially faster with it. So what Google Analytics does is it really allows you to compare apples to apples across all marketing channels on the back end. And for instance, not to pick on Facebook as much as I love doing it, but a great example that just came up yesterday is a client was asking about what they were seeing in terms of the Facebook sales data that was being reported through their Facebook advertising interface. And interestingly, Facebook takes credit for a sale through what they call a view-through conversion. In their measurement, they take credit for the sale if an ad for your product ever appeared on somebody's screen who ended up purchasing. That's not how other platforms doing it. And in fact, in going through into analytics, we could see that it's like, oh, Facebook is taking credit for like 25 sales last month. Analytics shows that actually there was only like 2 sales that were situations where somebody had clicked on a Facebook link before buying. So again, this just goes to the importance of tracking this sort of thing. Really understanding where your sales are coming from is possibly the most important thing. And also you get to learn a ton about your visitors and customers. So just a quick screenshot here. This is an example sort of anonymized with the redacted, if you will, for client privacy. This is an actual client example. If you've never looked at analytics, kind of overwhelming, but essentially it shows you on the left the source and medium of visits for the time frame you're looking at. So in this example, the one that's at the top of the page with the most users was Google, and CPC stands for cost per click. The next one down is the Google, what they call organic, which is essentially your SEO traffic. Below that, there's this direct, which is either folks that had your page bookmarked, maybe clicked on an email that somebody sent them, or Google can't figure out where they came from. So there's always a bunch of those. That m.facebook is people who came from mobile on Facebook. See, there's Instagram there. Go further down, there's Twitter, which is kind of blocked out. Then there's Facebook cost per click. And I don't need to go on, but it basically shows where every single person that comes to your site came from. And then there's all the data around how many times they visited, how many of them bounced, which has left the site without viewing more than 1 pages, average pages per session, how long they stayed on the site. And then it gets really interesting over on the right for e-commerce. It's like, oh, here's your e-commerce conversion rate. And then it shows the number of transactions that came from each marketing source, and then even the amount of revenue that came from each. And then sort of what we do with our clients, which is what you'll want to do, is typically on a monthly basis to export this, which takes all of about 30 seconds, and then add another column in your spreadsheet and add the cost that went into each of the channels where there was actual cost. Or even some folks, for instance, if they're doing a bunch of work marketing on Facebook, they'll put in the cost of the work that went in there. And then you can actually do a return on investment calculation in one more cell. It's really simple. You just sort of do the ratio of the revenue to cost, and you can find out exactly what return on investment you're getting through each channel. It gets a bit deeper than that. We don't want to go too far in, but I will just quickly jump over to, I've got Google Analytics open here with a Google sample account. They have some real-time tracking that we almost never use. I will share the note that Google has literally just upgraded their analytics to a new version that looks a little bit different than this, but well, to be honest, I haven't dug in and gone through every single feature on it, so I didn't want to present on it, and most people are still using this version at this point. But you can go in and look at, oh, the demographics of our audience. Let's have a look at gender. We can see how many people came that were male or female, and we can even compare revenue and conversion rates and all those other sort of factors I mentioned earlier. Google, I won't dive in, but Google will show some interests of those folks. Geography, you can see where they came from, city, country, province or state. We always want to look in at mobile because you can check in and see well, what percentage of people are coming on phones versus, and actually that's on the overview level, phones versus desktop versus tablets. And it's really important because this is different for just about every type of business. And again, I won't go digging in too deep, but it is interesting going down into the conversions in the e-commerce area. You can even look at multi-channel funnels and have a look at a model comparison tool. So this is where you can get super sophisticated. And so there's the example of the direct sales and the paid search. And this is a really limited sample data set. But instead of measuring, oh, how many people who bought where their last click was through this channel here, you can say, oh, well, what was the first click? Like, what did they click on first that brought somebody to the site? So, and if we click that, we can see there was $1,900 of conversion value previously for paid search. When we switch to first interaction, it's like, oh, there's actually 2,500 people who started their journey, their purchase journey with an ads click. You can even do what we often do, which is position-based. So it weights it across it, and not surprisingly, it's sort of kind of in the middle there. Anyhow, I could be in here all day, so I won't go any further on there. So some questions come up on do-it-yourself. And I mean, obviously, as an agency owner, I've got a vested interest in in helping out and building things for folks. That said, like I said, my personal mindset is I love do-it-yourself. I'm all for it. That said, in doing things yourself, and I touch on this because I think looking at the signups of who signed up, there were a lot of folks that it looked like were working on sites themselves and planning on going that route. The one thing is you have to be realistic about how challenging the work is, and to get some help. If you can't commit to doing it right, like if you can't do it right in e-commerce and online with the competition right now, if you can't commit to doing it right, then you probably need to get some help. Another bit of advice I would give folks is if there are things that you're going to need to do once in your business, and even say outside of web development sort of stuff we do, even something like configuring your Microsoft Exchange and doing something like that, like that's something you would just never bother to learn yourself unless you're passionate about that, because it's complex and you only ever have to do it once. So there's no possibility that it will actually be cheaper to do it yourself. And in fact, you probably won't get it quite right, and it will end up costing way more over time. So, I'm not again not recommending against DIY, but just really being practical along those lines. Just saw a question pop up that I'll answer in a moment. I'll just finish this thought. The other thing, and it's interesting because I kind of as a DIY guy, and I do a lot of DIY around my house. I love renovation and landscaping projects and that sort of stuff. I've learned though that I have to look at a project and really look at how hard is it going to be to learn? Am I ever going to do it again? And really the biggest question is, what is the risks if I get it wrong? So from that perspective, it's like, oh, learn how to do some drywall and painting, absolutely 100%. Learn how to do some carpentry and build decks and fences, absolutely 100%. Do I want to mess around with my electrical and plumbing? Not a chance. So again, it's really about looking at the risk there, figuring it out. And yeah, so on that note, and the funny screenshot is actually somebody who is attending today, and again, anonymized, but just as, and actually I said the word funny, by no means is it funny. This is a situation of somebody who's launched an e-commerce site. Lovely product, great mission behind what they're doing. The way the site is constructed, though, it fails from a performance and structure perspective to the point that it will either prevent people from buying or dramatically subvert their efforts. So this is the example of where you either want to make sure that you get it right, or find a way, like using this GTmetrix testing tool for performance, to determine if you got it right, or to consider getting some help. And we've got a question from Cindy, and she's asking, what is Wix like versus Shopify or Squarespace? The short answer is I haven't looked at Wix for a while. That said, when last I did it was nowhere near as advanced or user-friendly as Squarespace in terms of SEO and sort of marketing functions. So that's why with similar price points, I would absolutely recommend Squarespace over anything, really. Just again, I've been so impressed by, and I have no skin in that game, but I've been so impressed with the progress that they make and how good a job that they're doing. With the caveat that maybe Wix has come a long way since the last time I looked at it, although my suspicion is that it's probably still not quite as tight as Squarespace. Squarespace is really just, to me, the right compromise between making it accessible to do it yourself, but yet still having some fairly sophisticated marketing functions. And I think from an e-commerce perspective, probably the same thing. If you can set up a simple thing on it, that's probably fine. But if you're going to do an in-depth store, then you almost certainly want to go to Shopify. So with that said, I'm going to try and make good on my promise of having some time for more Q&A. So moving along. One thing to be aware of when you're jumping into e-commerce is the difference between selling locally and selling nationally. And selling locally, typically, often an extension of your existing bricks and mortar presence, or maybe you've been selling not through a store, maybe markets or shows or fairs locally. In that situation, you can leverage your existing customer base, you can email, you have ways of getting in touch, and you have a reputation in the community. So that's, very viable thing. You also have a leg up in local search. By being local, you'll have an advantage over companies that aren't local in the search engines. And also, you can even do some traditional marketing community stuff to build your presence. Jumping to national and international selling, much bigger pond. You can't rely on those existing sort of relationships typically, and you really do need a plan to, air quote, beat your competitors, which is dramatically different. And that said, there are still some great opportunities nationally for smaller companies. Smaller companies can typically serve a niche way better than large companies, which basically means picking a specific group within your overall audience and making sure that your marketing and product is better than anyone else's for that group. As well, there are some cool SEO opportunities versus big stores, and can't get too deep into that right now, but essentially most large retail outlets that are selling brand products use the brand description that's automatically provided to them through the data feed. By creating custom descriptions for these brand name products, if you're selling them, you can actually rank quite high nationally. We've done some cool experimentation around that and seen that come into effect. Again, mentioned in terms of product types, there's really a couple in terms of where I think of it in terms of the marketing challenges that come up. There are brand name products. So if you're a retailer that sells different lines of shoes, there's a bunch of brand name products that you're selling. There can be some low-hanging fruit there in areas like Google Shopping, because folks are already out there searching for those products. So if you have them, there are opportunities to get in front of the people that are actually shopping for them online right now. So there's some cool opportunities there. There's even some sneaky opportunities to advertise to folks that are visiting the brand site itself or visiting competitor sites. So then sort of the next one sort of think about is there's situations where you have your own brand and your own company, but you're making a product that is known and searched for. So something that people are already aware of your product and are out there searching for it. And in that case, search engine optimization comes in as a long-term opportunity, specifically, especially if there's a niche, and search marketing and advertising is also very viable. Folks that have the real challenge are if you have an innovative product, if you're a startup or an innovator, then there's probably not search volume. There's probably not people looking for your product because you invented it. So that's where you need to get into things like influencer marketing and leaning really heavy in social. And there's definitely opportunities, but some challenges there. And you can see I've included a link, which, and as mentioned, we'll share these slides. I've included a link to a really, really good post on marketing your Etsy shop. Now, Etsy, you immediately go to thinking of sort of arts and crafts. And that's true with what the site is, but this post is really fantastic about talking about the different marketing techniques that also apply if you have an innovative product that people aren't necessarily already looking for. So if that describes your situation, I definitely recommend checking that out. And yeah, there's a ton of marketing channels, and you know what? Rather than go through and describe them in painful detail, I think maybe I'll wait and have some folks ask some questions, or maybe tell me what they're wanting to sell online, and I can provide some insights as to which areas would work best. The one thing I will say first, as a marketer that gets engaged to help people sell, the highest ROI thing is if you have an existing store, existing customer base, and have an email list. That's hugely valuable. Or if you can develop a legitimate permission email list, that's hugely valuable. Next up, what we love to see is if somebody has a product that people are searching for, is that Google Shopping. And it's basically results that appear within search engines where you see the little images of products pop up. It's actually very cost effective. It's lower cost than the search advertising, which of course the search advertising is also great if you have a product people are searching for, although you kind of need a bit of a higher price point, sort of a minimum of about $100, I would say, or to have recurring revenues and understand your customer lifestyle value to get into search advertising. And again, the rest of the stuff I'll leave for now and just see if there's any questions, or if folks want to see if I'm feeling clever today and come up with the channels that they might use for their products. And then just pretty much second to last slide, discounting and special offers. What I'll absolutely share is that they work, but they can kill you. You've got to be really careful with discounts. If there's a once a year event and there's a reason why that event is happening, people won't automatically look to be getting a discount every time they shop with you. However, if you're regularly having sale prices and discounts and clearances, you'll lose the ability to sell at full price, and the image of your brand will be tarnished possibly forever. So you really want to be careful on this front. One strategy that I love is adding bonuses to what you're selling rather than discounting. And the best example that we had a ton of success with, going back to my software days, was finding other software partners that would give us steep discounts on their products so that we could add them in for free as a bundle. So in that case, we kept our full retail price and then promoted these other products as free. So basically, any brand damage actually was inflicted on the partner. That said, most of the partners were situations where they made money off recurring revenues from renewals or upgrades or that sort of thing, and they knew absolutely what they were getting into. But that's a great offering. So if if you're selling hoodies and you can throw in a free beanie or something, if people wear those, I have no idea, but that's kind of what you want to do is preserve the pricing of your main sort of products, but add some bonuses there. Of course, there's a million variations around this, and some people manage to walk that tightrope of having regular sales. So I just proceed with caution. So just kind of winding down here, kind of a summary of in getting started and actually launching a store. First thing is you want to leverage your existing influence and relationships. That might be your social media feed. In my case, it's sort of an interesting situation because we didn't promote this webinar widely, but typically we'll get some dozens of signups just through promoting it to my LinkedIn feed. You want to get into a niche. You want to do that experimentation. We talked about the Google Shopping and Google Merchant Center. And actually Google, both in Canada and the US now, are actually giving you some free exposure in Google Shopping if you hook up the Google Merchant Center. Fairly straightforward in Shopify and also in WooCommerce. So definitely something you want to confirm. And I think Squarespace has now even added that. If you have a super definable target audience and a really compelling offer, you can try Facebook and Instagram ads. Usually there does need to be, for a consumer type product, there usually needs to be some sort of time sensitive, attractive offer to get people to pull the trigger the first time they see your ad. Otherwise, you have to do a funnel strategy where you sort of warm them up over time and move them through a sales funnel, which way too complex to get into in this presentation. Then last, again, if you have good margins and or recurring revenue, then Google search ads are of course always a favorite. So the last slide before we go into questions really is my shameless plug. I'm not going to pump us up too much here, but basically we help with just about any sort of e-commerce situation, whether it's building a website or whether it is marketing and selling products. Been doing it for a long time and have clients across the US and Canada in e-commerce. And essentially we have our Plus ROI division, which does the bulk of our e-commerce advertising for sort of national clients that are marketing widely. And then we do have a business division called Jumpstart Web that serves typically smaller companies that are marketing locally within, and by locally I don't necessarily mean here in Victoria, British Columbia, but locally within their own market. And always happy to chat, always happy to answer questions. I also really enjoy connecting with folks on LinkedIn, or again, feel free to email me if we don't cover sort of whatever you need in this session. And with that, let's jump into some questions. We've got both the chat and the question and answer functions open. And also we now have Ryan, who leads all things dev and tech on our team. He and I have been working together on this for over 10 years. So if you have any really complicated technical questions we want to see if we can stump them with, please bring those up. So just going, I see Deborah is asking, she mentioned she smells small batch, handcrafted soap in local stores in the region and at craft fairs, looking to expand and looking online. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in that case, I would do what I would suggested earlier, which is create something super simple that has a few of your most popular products, and then basically strategize on how to reach the sort of folks that you would see at those craft fairs, and even doing. You might even get creative, and folks are missing the craft fairs and missing the ability to shop these sort of products. So doing something creative, like maybe partnering with some retailers, incentivizing the retailers to allow you to use them as a pickup location, or something like that. And yeah, I don't know that there is a super specific question there, but absolutely, if you do have another question, please feel free to fire it in there. I know there's another question in there. Hi, Aaron. Good to see you on here. And the question is, if you have to have a point of sale system to have an e-commerce site, the answer is absolutely not. We did some work. Actually, it's interesting, when COVID hit, we did two things. One was to start doing these webinars to sort of get out and get our name around in a way that we felt would help empower people to, especially in situations where folks are having a challenge with sort of the economic realities. And the other thing that we did was realize that we needed to pivot much more into e-commerce in terms of building websites than we did. So one of the first things we did was actually recruit a couple companies and offer to help them with e-commerce websites. And in the simplest example, with Shopify, you can either set your products in inventory on a sort of product by product basis, or what we did with one of our clients that did not have a point of sale system that they could that they could connect to Shopify, is basically you can create a spreadsheet that's formatted in a way that will work with Shopify. And you can then just upload that spreadsheet as often as you like. So you can refresh it daily if you like, and then all your inventory and product data will automatically be updated. Not the simplest thing in the world. And actually, when I was mentioning that in a simple Shopify build, setting up that sort of stuff is actually more work than almost than building the site itself. But definitely it's viable, and then there are the resources out there to. Shopify has wonderful resources, and in fact, they have a whole bunch of their client support resources located right here in Victoria, which is kind of neat. I know a couple of folks that work there, but yeah, they've got the resources to help folks figure that out. So we've got a couple minutes left, and I'm happy to stay on longer as well, but I think we're out of questions. Anybody else have anything they want to throw? Oh, here we go. Oh, so yeah, Deborah's checked back in. Just not sure how to get my shop out there. I have some followers on Instagram and Facebook and connect with current customers that way. Yeah, absolutely, Deborah. You've just nailed the extremely difficult challenge. So let me just mute that. The best answer I can really give you is to actually go and read that link that I shared on the Etsy site. It goes through a bunch of the exact things that you're going to need to do, which include things like teaming up with retailers, teaming up with other partners, having contests. Unless you're an absolute social whiz, you are going to need to spend some money on paid promotion. And again, that's where if you could team up with, a great example would be if you could team up with a group of complementary folk like yourself that have similar but not competitive products and create some gift baskets that people could enter to win. Facebook has some great tools around the Facebook lead ads. So that's an area where we see a great tool for building an email list is actually doing a contest and inviting people to sign up for your newsletter to be eligible to win this fantastic prize basket. And that's just a brainstorm idea. That might not be the perfect one, but definitely check out that Etsy post. You know what, I will jump in here, and that post is good enough and you'll probably want to look at it. So I will just find that link right now and I'll paste it back into the chat. Sorry, of course, my two screens are not, oh, there we go. Pardon me, you know what, I will drop that in the chat as soon as we finish our questions, just simply because it's going to break the break the presentation otherwise. Well, there we go. I've actually broken the presentation now, so I will grab it just one sec. I also have to, I got to remember not to follow my instincts and to stop doing things on the spur of a moment. But there is that link for you in order that we can, that you can go to it in advance of getting the, getting things. And then we've got another question here from Hafsa. Hi, Hafsa. And for a business having an established offline market, what would be the best way to set an online presence and experiment with its strategy? That's a big question. I mean, the simplest one, again, would be when I think of an offline sort of market or store, probably a ton of products. What I've recommended to clients in the past is to come up with a few real top sellers and create a bit of an online boutique. You know, maybe 3, 4, or a dozen products. Not to go too nuts on it, but just to do something very simple, to launch it, and then to market to your existing users and to complement it with some simple sort of online advertising. And again, often things like contests, finding ways to kind of make it fun and ways of driving people into the experience. And yeah, kind of a short answer to a long question, but yeah, hopefully that sheds a tiny bit of insight. And yeah, we're both hitting the hour, as well as currently no questions in there. But so again, we'll hang out for another minute or two. Oh, there we go. Someone's asked, what are services your company offers for a smaller business looking to advertise online for the first time? I guess the answer to that is really will help a company sort of launch, set up all their advertising accounts, get them going. Really, the most important thing I would say is that what we really do is we consult first before we engage in any sort of business relationship. Is have a look at their website, have a little chat with them, and actually identify if there are good opportunities to advertise online that sort of fit their strategy and budget. And the reason for that is just simply that we love helping people succeed, and we don't engage in situations where we can't see a positive outcome. So really, I'd say we can do just about anything in terms of advertising and marketing for a company, but it really all starts with that kind of initial informal assessment to see if we can see some good opportunities. I noticed that Deborah mentions that she didn't catch the link. And actually, it's funny. I mean, Zoom gets quite confusing with their interface, but I think just look earlier in the chat window, and you should see that morganshield.com link that's in there from a chat post or two ago that has links to that article. And if that doesn't show up, then definitely will be in the slides and video. With that said, does anybody else have anything they'd like to ask? Or, and again, always welcome to follow up and catch up afterwards. I love to get questions, so at your service. Everybody's quiet. So with that said, I think we will wrap things up. So thank you, everybody, for showing up and being engaged, and hopefully you got some value out of it.